She didn't know that night would change everything. New York was wet and loud. Rain ran down glass towers like tears. Taxis hissed on slick streets. Sirens throbbed far away. In a small studio apartment on the Lower East Side, Lena pressed her forehead to the window and tried to breathe. Rent was late. Tips were low. The cafe where she worked had cut her hours. She had another shift cleaning offices after midnight. She was 20, bright, and tired in a way that made her bones ache. Her phone buzzed. "Come to 700 Madison, penthouse. Now, no name, no plea, just a command." Her boss at the cleaning job had passed her number around for private work. Rich men like things fast and quiet. She needed cash. She said yes to small jobs, kitchens, wine stains, carpets, messes after parties. She did not know whose penthouse it was. She did not know the door would lock behind her. In the elevator mirror, she saw a girl who looked brave but was not. Brown skin, soft mouth, rain on her lashes. The elevator opened to a private foyer. A man in a black suit searched her bag without words, then waved her in. The room was huge, dim, and wrong. A storm pressed black hands against the windows. The skyline flickered. The curtains were a heavy midnight blue. The carpet felt like a cloud under her wet shoes. Gold light pooled on a low table, and then she saw him. People called him King Mars. The name wasn't a joke. He ruled deals that never touched paper. He held men by their secrets. No one spoke his real surname. In news photos, he stood in black, stone-faced, a shadow dressed as a man. He was wealth that moved like a knife. He sat at the far end of the room with his jacket off and his cuffs undone, like the rain had reached him too. His hair was dark. His eyes were darker. "Lena," he said, like he already owned the sound. She froze. I came to clean." "You came because you needed money." He watched her as if he was reading a report. "You will spend the night here." Her throat tightened. "I don't—" "You will sleep," he said, "on that bed. You will not leave this room until morning." There was a bed behind a partial wall. Clean sheets. No marks. The room smelled like cedar and night air. A keycard lock clicked behind her. The guard left. She and the king were alone. Terror rose like tide. "Why?" He looked at the rain. "Because no one says no to me." Lena's jaw trembled. She wanted to run. She could not, so she did the only thing left. She squared her shoulders and met his eyes. "I'm not yours," she said, voice low. "Not tonight. Not ever." Something shifted in his face. Not anger. Not yet. Something like surprise. Like a man who had never met a mirror. He did not touch her. He gave her a linen shirt, plain and white, pointed to the bed, and sat back in the half-dark, listening to the storm and to her breath, like he was keeping time with it. All night she did not sleep. All night he did not sleep either. At 5 a.m, the lock beeped. He stood. He pressed a black metal card into her hand. "For the trouble," he said. She dropped it on the table. "Keep it." Now his gaze broke. A crack. A line of light. He looked at the card, then at her. Then he nodded once, like a man who had heard a sentence and accepted it. The door opened. She walked past him without turning her head. The guard stood back. The elevator doors shut and took her away. He stood alone in a silent, expensive cage, and for the first time in years, the king felt small. Lena reached the street and pulled the night air into her lungs like water. The rain had cooled. Dawn glowed pale over the park. Her hands shook. Her body felt light, like she was walking without bones. She went home and showered until the water turned cold. At noon, she went to work at the cafe, eyes red but back straight. She made lattes for girls in yoga pants and businessmen who never looked up from their phones. She smiled because smiling made the day move. Near closing, a man in a dark cap sat in the corner with tea he did not drink. He watched the door, not her. When she cleaned his table, she saw the card under the saucer. A London number. Nothing else. She slid it into her apron, her heart beat too hard. That night she did not call. Days passed. Rent stayed due. Her mother called from far away and asked if she was eating. Lena said yes and looked at her cupboard and laughed a little, the soft, tired laugh you make when you're trying not to cry. On Friday, she found a white envelope under her apartment door. Inside was a business card with a single line, "You will not be my pawn. M." He had written the words she had said. She tore the card, then pressed the two halves back together. Something in her chest stung and warmed at the same time. She did not answer. She made rice with butter and cinnamon and slept like a stone. 2 weeks later, the cafe manager taped a notice by the register. "We're closing for renovations next month." Everyone groaned. Lena smiled at her co-workers and went to the back and slid down the wall till she was sitting on the floor. She counted coins. She made plans that ended with fences. That night, Rain returned. She sat with her knees to her chest and dialed the London number. He answered on the first ring. "Lena." The room shrank. Her breath went thin. "You left your words in my hallway," she said. "I wanted you to know I heard you." "Stop watching me." Silence, then a quiet, "I can't." Another silence. She could hear the soft echo of a large room around him. She could hear his breath. He did not sound like a king. He sounded like a man who had waited by a phone. "What do you want?" she asked. "To offer you a job," he said. "In London?" She laughed once. "You think I'm that hungry." "I think you are that good," he said. "Your file says you paint, you design, you keep things neat, you don't bend. I need someone who doesn't bend." "You keep files on people?" "On everyone." She imagined the city across the ocean, a sky the color of pewter, bridges over a river like a black ribbon. She imagined getting on a plane with $20 and a spine. "What would I be?" she asked. "My art curator," he said simply. "I bought a new building. I want a gallery. I want someone to choose pieces that tell the truth and hang them where people cannot look away." "That sounds like a trap." She meant it. "It might be," he said, "but it will have a door. And the door will be yours." She closed her eyes. Her heart, foolish thing, pressed forward like a hand. "If I come, you don't touch me," she said. "No games, no lock, no night like that ever again." "I won't touch you," he said, and the words landed with weight. "Say please," she said. He exhaled a laugh that almost wasn't a laugh. "Please, Lena." She packed a backpack and left a note for her mother that said, "I'm going to try." London smelled like rain and stone. The city felt older, steadier, like it had been holding secrets for 1,000 years and had learned not to brag. A black car waited outside Heathrow with a driver who called her miss and took her bag. The building was near the river, the color of smoke. The gallery space was tall and white, with concrete floors and long windows that caught every drop of light. Boxes leaned against walls. Canvases slept under muslin. A freckled woman with copper hair met her at the door. "I'm Maud," she said. "I run operations. You must be the one the boss won't stop talking about." Lena blinked. "He doesn't talk?" Maud smiled like she had already decided to like her. "He talks in negative space. Come on, let me show you your office." The office was small, but had a window that spilled the river into the room. On the desk sat a new laptop and a neat stack of files tied with black ribbon. A silver key lay on top. Her key. She touched it. Her throat got tight. "I thought it would be a trap," she murmured. "It is," Maud said cheerfully, "but of the good kind. Structure, purpose, paychecks on time." "And him?" Lena asked before she could stop herself. Maud's eyes softened. "He's complicated. But he keeps his word. He did." For the first week, Mars stayed out of the gallery. He sent notes through Maud that said things like, "Trust your eye," and "Keep the blue wall for something that hurts." He wired her an advance big enough to knock the air out of her and asked for receipts. She worked from morning till night. She chose 10 pieces that talked about hunger and 10 that talked about wonder and hung them in pairs so people would feel both at once. She made a small room with a single chair in front of a small painting of a red door. She wrote placards with gentle words. On Friday evening, the sky went orange and the river burned. Maud sent everyone home with donuts and said, "He'll come now." He did. He stepped into the gallery alone and closed the door like a man entering a church. He wore a dark suit and a face that looked carved. When he saw her, something in that face lit and then hid. Lena, Mars. He walked through the first room slowly. He stopped at the blue wall. He stood in the small chair room for a long time and did not sit. He read every placard. He came back to her. "I thought it would be loud," he said. "You made it quiet." "Quiet holds pain better," she said, "and love." He nodded once, a small, honest movement. "This is good work." "Thank you," she said, because she meant it. They stood, not touching, in the middle of a white room that felt like it hummed. The city pressed its breath to the windows. He put his hands in his pockets like a man choosing to be harmless. "Would you like dinner?" he asked. "Simple." She studied him. "With guards watching from the next table?" "No guards," he said. "Just me." "Then, yes." They went to a quiet place in Marylebone that smelled like lemon and pepper and had candles in little glass cups. He held the door and let the light touch her first. They sat in a booth. He did not sit beside her. He let the table be a line that meant safety. They ordered. He gave the wine list back without looking at it. He drank water. He asked her about art school she had not finished. She asked him about the first deal he ever made. He said it was for a man who needed to keep his shop and not lose it to a landlord with sharp teeth. He said he won. He said sometimes victory stains your hands. Her chest pinched. "You sound sorry." He looked at the candle for a long time. "I'm not sure I know that word." "You know it," she said softly. "You just call it something else." He breathed out. There it was, that crack again. It showed up when she looked at him like he was a person, not a king. It showed up when she refused to be afraid. When the waiter cleared plates, Mars set his napkin down and met her eyes. "Lena," he said, "I keep my promises, but I'm also honest. I want you, not to own, to hold, to learn how to be a man beside you. I don't know if I can be good at it, but I need you to know what I want." Heat rushed into her face and down her neck. Her heart beat so hard her wrists could feel it. She did not drop her eyes. "And I want my rules clear," she said. "No lies. No games. You don't touch me until I say." "Agreed." "And if I say stop," she added, voice steady, "you stop. No matter what." "I stop," he said at once, as if he had been waiting to say those words. The air changed, not lighter, deeper, like a room where music had just started. They walked out to a night that smelled like rain and fruit. He offered his arm and then lowered it, remembering. They walked side by side. In front of her building, he stood with his hands at his sides like he had tied them himself. "Good night," he said. "Good night," she said. He stood there until the elevator doors closed on her face. Then he let his head tip back and closed his eyes like a prayer he was not ready to admit he had said. The gallery opened with no party and no press. Mars didn't want cameras there. He wanted something cleaner. He wanted people to stand in front of truth with no witnesses but themselves. He stood in the doorway and watched strangers feel things, and for once, he did not need to control any of it. Lena moved through the rooms with a small smile, adjusting small details and letting the emotional current sweep her forward. He watched her like a man watching a tide that might carry him home. When the crowd thinned, they walked to the small room with the single chair. The red door painting glowed like a live ember. The city hummed beyond the glass. She sat. He stood by the door. "It feels like the door is inside me," she murmured, "like I'm one move away from opening it." "What's on the other side?" he asked. She looked up at him. You tell me? He stepped closer and then stopped, his body answering her rule before his mind could. She noticed. Her mouth softened. She held out her hand, palm up, asking without words. Here, she said. He placed his hand in hers, slow, careful, like he was handing her himself. His palm was hot. His fingers were strong. He did not close them. She closed hers around his. The first touch. Electric, calm, both. Breathe, she said. He did. The breath shook on the way out. Now look at the painting, she whispered. Don't look at me yet. He obeyed. The red door steadied in his vision. The black line around it steadied too, like a promise. Good, she murmured. You follow better than a king. You follow like a man. He laughed, a short spark that burned sweet in the air. He looked down at her, eyes warmer than she had ever seen. The softness there scared her. It also made her want to climb into it and sleep. Come here, she said, and the words were a key. He stepped between her knees. She touched his jaw with her free hand and felt the small jump under his skin, the yes he did not say. She rose from the chair and pressed her forehead to his chest. His scent was cedar and something dark, like night just before rain. Hold me, she said. He wrapped his arms around her, slow, reverent. He fit his mouth to her temple. He did not kiss. He breathed her in like she was oxygen he had been living without. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. You're learning. I have a good teacher, he said. Not everyone loved that the king was getting soft. The underworld has ears and hates change. Old partners called to ask if he was losing his edge. Men with cold hands knocked and made polite threats that were just real threats wearing suits. Mars said the same thing to all of them. I have other interests now. His voice was calm. His eyes were not. One night, while Lena locked the gallery, a man stepped from the shadows under the awning and smiled a smile that did not touch his eyes. Miss, he said, I'll take that bag. She froze. The street was quiet. Her hand tightened on the strap. I don't have anything, she said. You have value, he said, tone light. That's enough. He stepped closer. She stepped back. The man reached. A black car slid to the curb and the door flew open. Maud jumped out like a curse with red hair. She had a small can in her hand. Pepper spray, Maud said sweetly, and very bad aim. The man blinked. He weighed the street and the women and the can and the car, and then shrugged and disappeared down the block like smoke. Maud reached for Lena's hands. You okay? Lena nodded and then shook, the fear rolling through her late but strong. Who was he? Someone who thinks women are doors, Maud said. We're not. They told Mars. He came to the gallery with eyes like winter. You're moving, he said. I have a lease, Lena said, chin up. You have a beating heart, Mars said quietly. It's more important. Come to my building, just until this is clean. She wanted to argue. But the look in his eyes was not control. It was terror. For her. It made her knees go weak. Okay, she said. He exhaled like he had been underwater. The penthouse in London was not the same as the one in New York, but it felt the same. Tall windows, dark walls, a city that glittered like a necklace. When the elevator opened, Lena's body remembered that first night and trembled. He saw it. He stepped aside, so far away it almost hurt to see him there. Your room is down the hall, he said gently. Your key. He placed the card on a table and backed up another step. She went to the room. It was warm, light, soft, a bed like a cloud, a chair by the window, a small vase with one white peony. A note sat on the nightstand. If you wake in the dark, I will be in the kitchen, not the door. She laughed, a small sound that tasted like relief. At midnight she woke. Not from fear. From want. It pulsed like a warm light under her skin. She slid out of bed and padded down the hall. The kitchen glowed low. Mars stood at the counter with a glass of water, bare feet, open collar, sleeves pushed up, human. He saw her and straightened like a man who had been caught praying. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "I can," she said. "I just don't want to." They stood close, but not touching. The night was a thick velvet. London breathed. She set her hands on the cold counter edge and looked up at him. "I want you to kiss me," she said, voice even. "Slow, careful, like the first real thing you've done in years." He swallowed. "Yes," he said, and waited. "Now," she whispered. He stepped in, telegraphing every inch, asking with his eyes one last time. She nodded. He bent and touched his mouth to hers. Heat. Home. A door opening with no force at all. He kissed her like he was learning a language, and she was the person who wrote the dictionary. He kept one hand at his side, the other on the counter, so she could choose every change in depth and tempo. She slid her fingers into his hair, and he exhaled a sound that shot straight through her. She pulled back, breathing hard. "Good," she said. "Again." He smiled, soft and gone in a second, and kissed her again. They moved as if the city had fallen away. When her back touched the cool cabinet door, she pressed a palm to his chest. "Stop," she said gently. He stopped at once. She studied his face in the half-light. There was sweat at his temple. There was want. There was restraint like steel. "You kept your word," she said. "I will always keep it," he said, voice rough. She nodded. "Come to bed." His eyes closed once, like a man taking a blessing he thought he would never earn. They went to her room, not his. She lit the small lamp. The room turned gold. She stood at the foot of the bed with her fingers on the hem of her t-shirt, nervous and brave at once. "My rules," she said, breath low. "You follow my pace." "Yes. And if I say stop?" "I stop," he said, and meant it. She stepped closer. She took his hand and placed it flat on her waist, over cotton. The heat of his palm spread like honey. He did not move it. She guided it slow, up her side to her ribs, then back down. He dragged air into his lungs with care. She took his other hand and set it at the base of her neck. His thumb sat on her pulse. It beat hard against his skin. He closed his eyes for a second, like he was holding a live thing. "Look at me," she whispered. He did. She lifted on her toes and kissed him, open now, deep. Want flared, clean and bright. She pulled his shirt free and pushed it up, and he let her, lifting his arms only when she tugged. He was all hard lines and heat and the faint scent of cedar. "Beautiful," she said, simple truth. He looked like he did not understand the word, like he had never owned it. "You," he said instead, voice rough with awe. She laughed, soft, and tugged him to the bed. They moved slow, mouths, hands, breath. Nothing rushed, everything chosen. When she guided him lower, he paused, eyes searching her face. She nodded, and he went, reverent. When she needed to breathe, she said stop. And he stopped, and that trust broke something inside her and set it right at the same time. When she pulled him up and took him into her hand, his breath staggered. He pressed his forehead to her shoulder and let her lead. When she drew him into her body, he said her name like a promise he would write until he died. They moved in a rhythm that felt as old as stone and as new as rain. She set the pace. He matched it, held it, learned it, followed it. She drew him back by inches when too much came too fast. He nodded, shaking, eyes wet, and listened like her breath was scripture. When the edge rose, she whispered, "Now," and he went with her, and the world came apart quiet and bright and true. After, they lay tangled and warm. London hummed like a cat beyond the window. He put his mouth against her hair and said nothing because there were no words that would not ruin it. She traced shapes on his chest and smiled into the dark. "Your rules are good," he murmured at last. "They keep us human," she said. "They keep me yours," he said, so soft she almost didn't hear. They fell into a rhythm, mornings with coffee and soft jokes in the kitchen, days at the gallery where she built rooms that healed people without asking permission, evenings where he left his phone in another room and learned her favorite songs, nights where they forgot the size of the city and remembered the shape of each other. He asked before every touch. It didn't break the mood, it made it deeper. It made the air honest. "Can I hold your wrist?" "Yes." "Can I take this off?" "Yes." "Can I watch you?" "Yes, stay close." And sometimes she said, "Not tonight." And he kissed her forehead, and they slept with their legs tangled and woke with their hearts calm. They learned to fight too. He kept secrets out of habit. She called him out. He listened, then told her the truth, even when it was ugly. Once she found a file with her name in a drawer and felt the old fear rise. "You keep records of me," she said, eyes bright with hurt. "I did," he said, "before I knew how to ask you questions instead." "Burn it." He did. He lit a match in a metal tray on the balcony and watched paper turn to ash while rain fell and steam rose. He kissed her wet hair and said, "I will earn you." "You already are," she said, and meant it. The men who did not love his change did not sleep. They took photos when Lena walked alone. They tested fences. They whispered to tabloids. They hired a man with a long memory and a short fuse. One cold night after a late install, Lena took the service elevator down with a crate of frames. The basement smelled like dust and steel. The door to the alley clicked. A figure stepped between her and the street, the man from the awning. "Pretty lamb," he said softly. "The king thinks he owns the wolves." She held the crate like a shield. Her heart ran. "I'm not property," she said. "Move." He smiled. "You'll move for me." He reached. She swung the crate. It cracked against his arm. He cursed. She ran. He caught her sleeve. She tore free and sprinted up the ramp. The street was empty. She cut left toward the river, lungs burning. A car screeched from nowhere and cut him off. Doors flew open. Two of Mars's men stepped out, clean suits, colder eyes. Maud leaned out the window and yelled, "In!" Lena dove into the back seat. The car shot forward. The man hurled something metal that clanged against the door and spun away. "Seatbelt," Maud snapped, voice shaking. Lena clicked it, then finally let herself cry. They told Mars. He walked to the window and put his hands on the glass so hard the city seemed to flinch. "I'm done," he said. "No more warnings." He called old names and used old teeth and shut doors in back alleys where no one ever knew there had been doors at all. He paid off one man and buried another with favors he'd been saving for years. He pulled his empire tight and clean and left a circle of cold around the life he was building with her. When he came home, he didn't speak. He went to his knees in front of her chair and put his head in her lap like a warrior at the altar. "I couldn't breathe until I saw you," he said. She held his face in both hands. "Breathe now." He did. He breathed her in and steadied on it like a rope across a cliff. They went back to New York in spring. The city wore light like a crown. Trees made green tunnels in the park. The penthouse was the same, but they were not. When the elevator doors opened, she did not tremble. He did. She stood by the window where she had once stared at him and waited for morning. She touched the glass and then turned and walked to him. "Come here," she said, smiling. He came. She took his hand and led him to the bed. She lay on her back and pulled him over her. He braced on his forearms and looked down at her like he was looking at a miracle that might leave if he blinked. "We survived," she said. "We began," he said. She wrapped her legs around his waist. He shuddered. She kissed his throat. "Show me." He did. Slow. Deep. With a care that burned. After, they ate cold strawberries in the dark and laughed like teenagers. He told her a story about stealing a boat when he was 16, and she told him a story about the first painting she made that scared her and made her proud at the same time. "I want your work on these walls," he said. I don't want to live with strangers anymore. She smiled into his shoulder. Then we'll fill them. The next show at the London Gallery was hers. Not her curation, her art. She worked at night, canvas big, colors bold but controlled. She painted the red door again, this time cracked open with gold light bleeding through. She painted a city as a forest, with the trees made of glass and the roots made of trains. She painted a man's hands emptying out their weapons and filling with soft things, linen, flowers, a woman's wrist, trust. When Mars walked in and saw the first finished piece, he stopped and put a hand on the wall because the room dipped. "That's me," he said. Not a question. "It's us," she said. He swallowed. "Is it good?" "It's true," she said. He touched the lower corner of the canvas like it was holy. Opening night came. People cried in front of the hands. A woman in a white coat stood in front of the red door and whispered, "I can leave him," and walked outside and made a call. A young guy took notes and shook and then kept writing. An old man laughed like he had remembered a joke from childhood and it was his again. Mars stood back, out of the way, and watched a life happen around him that he had not purchased and could not control. He looked at Lena and felt the edges of himself soften like winter ground in spring. At the end of the night, when the last person left and the lights went low, he turned to her in the doorway and said, "Marry me." She blinked. "That fast?" "It's not fast," he said. "I started the night you said no." She laughed, choked, cried, and shook her head all at once. "Ask me again. Ask me when it's quiet and not after all this." He nodded, smiled, stepped back. "Tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after that. I have time." "You do," she said. "We do." They went to the river at dawn. Fog lay close to the water like a shawl. He wore a coat and nervous hands. She wore a smile that wouldn't leave. He took a small box from his pocket and did not open it. "I don't want to cage you," he said. "I want to stand beside you and be better because I'm beside you. Will you let me do that for the rest of my life?" She looked at the fog, the water, the man who had learned how to ask, and she said, "Yes." He opened the box. The ring was simple, gold, a small square diamond, no fuss. He slid it onto her finger like he was signing a treaty he had been born to sign and had spent years fighting and had finally learned to honor. She kissed him, slow and sure, and the fog lifted on cue like the river itself was saying, "Amen." The wedding was small. Maud cried. The city did not. The city kept moving because cities are busy. But sometimes, when rain ran down the glass towers, it sounded like applause. They went home, not to a cage, to a place with her canvases on the walls and his jackets in the closet and both of their coffee cups on the counter. He lifted her in his arms and carried her to the bedroom, not because he needed to, but because he wanted the old story to be healed by a new ending. He laid her down and undressed her slow, asking with eyes, with breath, with the way his hands waited at every change. She undressed him too, laughing when his cufflinks got stubborn. He kissed her mouth and her throat and the small scar on her knee from when she fell off her bike at 8, and she gasped, and he smiled against her skin. "Stop?" he whispered, as always, the word a lit candle between them. "Don't," she said, and pulled him down. They moved like a prayer learned by heart and spoken new each time. It was open, honest, hungry, patient. When she arched and called his name, he followed, and their breath made one sound in the dark. After, when the city's pulse slowed in the windows and the night lay soft around them, she put her hand over his heart. "It's calmer," she said. "It found its home," he said. "You," she said. "You," he answered. They fell asleep like that, her hand on his chest, his hand on her back, the door inside both of them open at last. Years later, there were new paintings on their walls and new scars on their hearts, because that is how life works. They learned and forgot and learned again. They fought small, fair fights and made up like artists. They took trains just to look out the window. They walked in rain without umbrellas because sometimes getting wet together felt like church. He still asked before every touch. Not because he feared losing her, but because it reminded them of who they had chosen to be. She still set the pace. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes just a hand at the nape that said, "I'm here." People still told stories about King Mars, but those stories changed. They began to end with a woman's name. When strangers stood in Lena's gallery and cried, he stood in the doorway and felt the old quiet settle into something new, peace. The world stayed big and sharp. But the love they made was bigger and softer. It didn't save them from pain. It held them through it. On a night when the city was loud and the river black and the windows warm against the dark, he turned to her in bed and whispered, "You will never be my pawn." She smiled with her eyes closed. "No," she said, "I'm your heart." "And I," he said, kissing her palm, "am finally yours." If you enjoyed this love story, please subscribe for more. Like this video if you want part 2 scenes from their married life. Comment your favorite moment and share it with someone who loves romance and suspense. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story.